All right, so this is going to be our last set of notes on Chapter 7, Jeffersonian America. Today, we're going to focus on just kind of ending the chapter up and summarizing everything, talking about a couple kind of key points to think about, as well as the War of 1812, which is America's second significant war, like real war that we're in. This one, again, with the British, but it's not. Again, not another great war for America. So we'll go ahead and just get right to it. All right, so the War of 1812. Um, the reality of the War of 1812 is we're not ready for it. Um, we're outmatched. I mean, this is a war against Britain. Okay, so if you know anything about the War of 1812, basically, we talked last time about a group called the War Hawks. And these were these younger members of government, Congress and Senate. And they really wanted war with Britain so we could get Canada and we could get an end of the British impressments of American sailors. Basically, what those are, something called, you should probably write this word down, impressments. Basically, what that means is the British were coming onto American ships, and we kind of talked about this with the Embargo Act. They were coming onto American ships and arresting soldiers, like detaining them, claiming that they are actually British citizens and are traitors and that sort of thing. So basically, what Britain is doing is really harassing the United States because they can. It's that Big Brother mentality, and they know we don't have much of a military to fight them off. So the War of 1812 is a war with Britain, if you want to call it that. It's really not a huge war, but we'll go into that a little bit. But we are at a huge disadvantage going into this war. We listen too much to the war hawks, and America finds itself in another conflict. Okay, and probably not a good thing. So we have no army, or no real navy. We've already established that. So what does that mean is you're going to have to raise militia to fight. You're going to be ragtag groups of troops, very much like the American Revolution. And you're going to have to basically hire, merchants and other sailors to be kind of a makeshift navy. Remember, Jefferson shrunk the size of our navy to about 7 ships. We have a few more than that now, but we still don't have a formidable military, certainly not as formidable as the British. So we have no army or navy going into this war. We have no money, which is certainly a bad thing because war costs money. And the country is very divided about it. Basically, people in the South don't support the war all that much. And why people in the North actually, no, I'm sorry. People in the South are a little bit more supportive of the war, and then people in the North, not as much. So there's a lot of division about this conflict in the country. But the biggest issue is we don't have the military needed for a war, and we don't have the money to really fund it. Okay? So a lot of people think of the War of 1812 as the British trying to get America back. That's really not what this war was about. That was never really a major fear, so to speak. The British, in some sense, were done with the American colonies, with the United States, and trying to make it part of Britain again. They were on to other things and focused on other stuff, and they had financial problems of their own still. King George is still kicking around in there. He's crazy as ever, King George III. By this point in his life, he's wandering the halls of Buckingham Palace thinking he's being chased by ghosts. I'm not making that up. He actually was. He was crazy by this time. So Britain isn't in a much better position. But they are in a better position because they actually have a very experienced and very well funded military, even though they've got a lot of financial issues of their own. All right. So the question has to be, how do we win this war? And it's a lot like the American Revolution. We don't really win the War of 1812. It's another situation where the British get to the point where they kind of look at it and be like, this really isn't worth it anymore. Why do we keep fighting? Okay? And in truth, if you look at most of the battles from the War of 1812, really the British won. A lot like the Revolution. The British win more battles. They're more experienced with their military. They're battle hardened. Nothing, looking at this war, there's nothing that should say, oh, the new young United States of America is going to come out and win this war. Okay? So the question again remains, how do we quote unquote win this war? Well, it comes down to pretty much a few key battles that were in key times at key places. Number one is the Battle of Lake Erie. The Battle of Lake Erie was in 1813, obviously on Lake Erie, up near, if you've ever been to Cedar Point or near Put-in-Bay, it took place near there. And the British were coming in and trying to gain control of the Great Lakes. This stopped the British advance through the Great Lakes and gave the United States kind of control of Lake Erie and the ability to invade Canada through the lake rather than having to do it by land, which would have been much more difficult. Another key victory was something called the Battle of the Thames. And this is a battle won by William Henry Harrison, who was the Western general. And it took place in Canada, kind of near the border between what is now Michigan and like Ontario, Canada. And this was a big victory for Harrison, which was very demoralizing to the troops on the British side. A lot of the soldiers on the British side in this war were hired mercenaries almost. In fact, a lot of them were Indians. The Battle of the Thames is famous for this is where Tecumseh was killed. And he was a commissioned general commissioned brigadier general by the British to help in the fight in this war. Okay, so that's another key victory. They're happening at the right times to kind of like the Battle of Saratoga. You have a good win at the right time. The British say, do we even bother continuing? We're not really into it, whatever. And the final kind of key battle that we win is the Battle of New Orleans. The Battle of New Orleans, that is in the South. Oops. And our Southern general, of course, is Andrew Jackson. And this is a walloping. While the British in this battle lost a couple thousand troops, the United States lost 21. 8 killed and 13 wounded. Okay? News spread around the country of this great victory in the Battle of New Orleans. And while they were already figuring out the peace to end this war, this is in 1814, while they're already figuring out the peace to end this war, news of the Battle of New Orleans came through, and it, made everybody like, yeah, we whipped the British, we're sweet, we won a major battle here, and what that sparks is a new sense of American nationalism. See, we really feel like we won this war, but it's another case of the British kind of quitting. Again, it's really expensive, and the British don't really have much to gain in this conflict. So they look at it and say, why do we keep fighting the Americans? We got other problems and other places to deal with. Let's just let them do their thing. Let's, end this conflict and go on about our lives. Okay. So, super important AP point number 9. I think that's what we're at. So, number 9, super important AP point number 9 is something called the Hartford Convention. Okay? So, and I call it the death of the Federalist Party because this was the last legs of the political branch of the Federalist Party. Obviously, they're still in power in the courts, but as a political party, this was their last gasp. So a bunch of Federalists get together in Hartford, Connecticut, and talk about seceding from the Union, actually having northern states seceding from the Union. there wasn't a ton of support for this. You'd say maybe moderate support for the concept of secession. And it would have been a really bad idea for that to happen, because at this point, if any part of America breaks away from the rest of it, it's going to be really hard to sustain that as its own country. But the people at the Hartford Convention are very upset about this War of 1812. They don't like it and how it has gone down. So they get together, they talk about possibly seceding. They get talked a little bit off that ledge, and instead, interestingly enough, ask for more amendments to the Constitution. But at the same time as these guys are meeting, news breaks of the great victory at the Battle of New Orleans. All of a sudden, that nationalism is sparked, and the concept of breaking away from the country seems pretty traitorous. So all of a sudden, all the Federalists at this Hartford Convention suddenly look like a bunch of traitors, and that the Federalist Party is indeed very anti-American. That's a big deal, okay? The Federalists are anti-American. People walk away from the party. People don't want to be a part of that group. And the Federalist Party is effectively dead. So it's the Hartford Convention ultimately what kills the Federalist Party, making it no longer a significant or viable political party in America. Okay, so question. Why is it important for America that there is not another major European war for 100 years? I want you to email me a response to that question. I also have given you questions on previous videos, and you haven't emailed me those responses. That might have a negative impact on your participation grade for this quarter. So you want to probably get on that pretty soon. Tell me why you think there's not why it's important for America that we don't have another major European war for 100 years. That war, of course, being World War I, which of course is exactly 100 years from the end of the War of 1812 and 1814. Okay? All right, so here's a map of some of the pivotal battles and moments from the War of 1812, the Battle of New Orleans down here, the Battle of the Thames is like around here, and of course the Battle of Lake Erie here. So that's to give you an idea kind of where we are and what we are at this point. Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on, talk a little bit about a couple other things here. So first off, I want to give you just you don't have to write this down if you're writing any of this down, but give you a couple quick ideas on writing a essay or short answer question, whatever. Okay, so a thesis statement. A thesis statement here looks something like this, right? Based on stuff from this chapter. The important events of Jefferson's two terms, the Louisiana Purchase and the embargo, those are the key events of Jefferson's term as president, are once again directly shaped by events beyond America's control, the Napoleonic Wars in Europe. That is a thesis statement. I am connecting the Napoleonic Wars in Europe to the Louisiana Purchase and the Embargo Act because they're both associated. Okay? We're talking about a political reason and an economic reason with the essay. Jefferson was keen to turn his back on Europe and watch America's farmers, of course Jefferson loves his common man farmers, settle the frontier. However, as long as America is a nation that produces a lot of large surpluses or a lot of raw materials, it will need markets to sell those goods. We talked about this in the last video. They need markets to sell their goods. And those markets are of course, in Europe. Okay? So really the conflicts going on in Europe, it's impossible for us to avoid. We saw what happened with the embargo. France is, and Napoleon is kind of focused a little bit more on wars in Europe, so that allows us to gain the Louisiana Purchase for steel. But of course, because they're embroiled in conflicts between Britain and France, with the Embargo Act, that hurts us. Okay? This is a very basic response to a question here, but it's giving you a political reasoning and economic reasoning for why two important events from early in the 18th century are associated with another world event, which of course is the Napoleonic Wars. All right, let's take a look at another one, another thesis statement, right? So John Marshall is Alexander Hamilton in black robes. In other words, John Marshall is a Federalist in a judicial position, which we already know. Every, and I emphasize the word every major decision from Marshall's Supreme Court strengthens the power of the federal government at the expense of state governments. As a result, Marshall's decisions are a big source of nationalism, right? When you strengthen the power of a national government, make a nation more powerful, nationalism is going to result. Okay? Now, Supreme Court decisions are, of course, political decisions, but their subjects are typically dealing with something social or economic. So, unlike Hamilton, as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Marshall cannot be removed from office. He's appointed for life. He gets appointed in 1801 by Adams and serves until 1834, when we're under the presidency of Andrew Jackson. He's in there for a long time. Therefore, he's very, very influential. All right. So again, this is language and verbiage that you can use to maybe help create essay responses and thesis statements in the future, and hopefully that's helpful. All right. So what is the bottom line for Chapter 7? The beginning of the 19th century saw significant change in America. The Jefferson presidency greatly expanded the size of the United States, but sometimes fell short of the needs of the common man. We see this in the Embargo Act. We see the expanding the size of the United States, of course, with the Louisiana Purchase. A great success for Jefferson, a great failure for Jefferson with the embargo. We see the first party system, meaning Federalists and Democratic Republicans begin to disintegrate as the Federalist Party continues to weaken and everywhere but the courts, and a poorly planned war effort in the War of 1812 threatens the nation's stability. The War of 1812, though we won it theoretically, did not go particularly well for America. We lost a lot of battles. We didn't look particularly prepared or impressive. You know, there's room to grow for sure. We also see the emergence of a new generation of political leaders, two of which, particularly Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay, would go on to shape American policy for the first half of the century. I mentioned Henry Clay yesterday. This guy's really, really important to American history in the first half of the 19th century. Every important political decision that's made from about 1810 to about 1850, Henry Clay has his hand in, and we're going to keep hearing about him from now up through about Chapter 13. Andrew Jackson, of course, is really, really important as a president. For better or worse, he does some good things. He does some bad things too. But ultimately, at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, Andrew Jackson, his ideas and his policies significantly shape the future of the United States. So anyway, that's it for Chapter 7. Quiz and packet will be due on Friday. I'll have Mrs. Metter. I'll get her copy of Friday's quiz. And please email me if you have any questions, all right?